all made and cinched down tight over your ears. So take it away, Dave and Becky.
Thanks, Nighthawk. I'm Dave, and Meki is not with us today, sadly. He is unavailable, but that's okay. It's okay. I'm here. Calm it down. Everything's good. And this is Shiny Side Out, and I'm broadcasting on WZZR from Australia for Revolution Radio, which is, the website is revolution.radio. That makes it really easy. And it's home to fresh, unfiltered ideas and conversations. You'll find those in the chat room where I am now. And the website's also a great place to get your merch. You can also access the archives. The archives are free. And if you miss Solaris' show, don't worry about it. She had Madeline on, another host on Studio A. And they were talking about all sorts of things. And when I caught them at the end, they were talking about Kamala Harris, which I'll get into in a few minutes' time. But Solaris has a few shows. They're all great. And she has great guests. And just a little shout out to Madeline and Solaris. I don't get time normally. I'm not normally awake when their other shows air. So it's appreciated that everyone puts enough time into this station. Now, if you're interested in becoming a radio host on Revolution Radio, then remember, you've still got guidelines you have to follow. You can't just say whatever you want. You have to not swear. You must promote the station, and then you can talk about anything you want. Granted, it's now then up to you whether you put it onto YouTube like we do. We like our archives there, and it's good for us. We don't get any money from either of them, of course. I used to play my title track that I wrote and get some royalties off CD Baby because I registered the title track with them, and I don't know what's going on with that. I just don't get any of those played anymore. Doesn't matter for whatever reason, so I stopped playing the intro. But if I can find the intro file again, I'll definitely do that again. I had a hard drive crash a long time ago, and there it goes. But I could nick it from one of those videos that I've got. I don't know why I don't have time. I just don't seem to have time. I'm unemployed, have been for 6 months, and it's not fun. And it's we do live in the money game, and when you don't have money, it's like when you've mortgaged yourself beyond payment ability in Monopoly. You know it's just inevitable. At some point you're going to have to quit the game. And I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't commit suicide, and I'm not suicidal. And if anything ever happens to me, then I expect my audience to have one of those conspiracy boards up there and then start to plot from all of the information you've heard us talk about who most likely is the culprit. All right, just letting you know, because it won't be me. I'll tell you that much. So this is episode or show number 647. If Meki were here, he would say 740 and 600. That's a lot of shows. They're weekly shows, but there's a couple of shows each year around Christmas and New Year where the station normally does a continuous broadcast. Now I've just got someone asking, talk about UBI, aka Universal Basic Income, please. Happy to, will do, and let's just do a shout out before I close the intro. Amiga Logos and Maced, Jim Jones. There's a few in the chat room. Posting a lot of YouTube videos so that we can all watch it and share opinions, because we develop an opinion based on a set of information. Let's call it a data set. Try and get more data sets so you make it a meta study on anything. and then you can, understand more about how every one of those data sets is constructed. That's called a slant in media. And some media, for example, like, let's say Fox and CNN, they're in hatred with each other, not love, they're in hatred with each other. And they pander to their own audience, being Fox being right, the political right, and CNN being the political left. They do try occasionally, both try, actually they don't try at all, they don't even attempt to try to pander to the middle. You would imagine they would. But what happens is the more they lean towards the middle, just the middle, then they start to lose audience. Because we've discovered over 100 years of doing propaganda through media that there is only one direction that your audience will go. Now, the only reason they started listening to you because their thoughts are your broadcast words, and it aligns with the audience. So once you start to change your broadcast voice and talk about different sides of an argument, heaven forbid, then those people turn away. And if the only people who are still listening to the news, the mainstream news, are extremists, then they're gone straight away. They're the first to leave the flock, those who you now disagree with. And they don't want to hear your rubbish. If you'd stayed in the middle the whole time, then you would still have them. If you weren't a politically slanted media, then you would have those extremists can still exist. That's fine, let them. But the real truth is what you could have been broadcasting all along. However, that doesn't happen. It might have happened 30 years ago when the news wasn't sponsored. It was cross-subsidized by other programs on the same free-to-air channels. Let's say 40, 50 years ago. There's one standout news anchor throughout the moon missions and the JFKs and through Nixon, and Walter Cronkite comes to mind. And he was the most beloved newsreader in American history. Did he do slants? Did he provide scripted narratives from any of the parties? Less likely than today. Today is all about political slant. It is all about propagating the message from the government. Whatever they say that you're meant to say, it's called a tear-off. Imagine if there was a single news outlet and they broadcast a teletype message or, on a continuous paper into your news office. That was weird. Is that my CIA handler on the station talking then? Very strange. At least I have that recorded and streamed straight to YouTube, so I can go back and I can know that it wasn't me that said it. Anyway, so tear off, and they used to maybe research the tear off, and then it became just do a straight read. It's going to go live to air with a straight read from the tear off, and this is the news as instructed. And that's a shame. It really is a big shame, because as we started to see the evolution or the de-evolution of central non-biased news, we started to see more of this, the deletion of investigative journalism, and then they're just reading the propaganda from the big boss. That's it. And the big boss gets the words from they got the bat phone, call it a red phone or whatever phone you want, from the owner. You're going to talk about this, is going to be the story. And I don't care if it, if it knocks out, because you're going to, if you say you've got an hour show or a half an hour news program, you don't have time to talk about some things. You have to choose. You've got to pick and choose. Well, these are our 5 top stories. We're gonna run with these. But that knocks out the cat up the tree story. Who cares? Or that knocks out something even more important. And that is a mission from the government, to be able to have a story that is not as important as the one that's the most threatening to them, just pushed out. Just give them something else. Maybe give them a leak. That's it. We'll leak our own story. That's what we'll do. Yes. We'll leak our own story to the media with something they will absolutely run. They're gonna run it. Doesn't matter, even if it pushes something else out, something that we didn't want them to talk about. That's the way media runs. Yeah, you can say that you've got editors, publishing editors, everyone there, but did you know that when one of the whistleblowers had discussed media from, I think, the 80s to the 2000s or thereabouts, I forget the time period it was, but it was, at least 20 years worth of their history in the media. And they said that the government had installed agents. I don't know whether they're FBI or CIA. I don't really care. That's three-letter agency agents in there to control at the final, gate what went to air and what didn't go to air. And they were the ones that were assisting this filtering of the news by government instruction. Oh, you can't run this story? Oh, okay. Thanks for that. Well, we won't run it. Okay, good. Done. And that was how it ran. Anyway, I'm going to finish the intro, because there's 15 minutes down the toilet, right? Talking about something I'm sure we already knew. All right, so now, did you know that you can catch us, that's Shiny Side Out, on air, online, and anywhere on your smart device? And to do that, you need to get an app so that you can listen everywhere, or listen at home, sitting in your favourite chair with your feet up, or maybe like at the kitchen table in a country-styled kitchen on a Grace tabletop digital radio. That's what you can do. And I said it's free to get the archives, and I'm broadcasting out of Dark and Jam Country because we did the respectful thing and understood who used to live here before we occupied the country with white folk. This is England coming here and pushing everyone out of the way. When I say pushing, I mean forcefully unaliving a lot of people and just taking it because England declared, and I've said this 1,000 times, one last time, and I won't say it again. Actually, I can't really promise that. Sure, I'll say it 100 more million times. Right? They only declared humans here in Australia as part of the fauna. Isn't that extraordinary? That they should do that? But because, in the British Empire, say what they want. It just gave them an excuse. It's kind of like when people were used to experiment on animals. We've got this really highly toxic blue colour. We can't, that's actually an acrylic paint, blue. It used to be so toxic you couldn't touch it. We got this thing, but we wanted to make sure just to see how toxic it is. And because animals, this isn't me saying this, I'm portraying a character from the olden days. And because, we don't consider animals to have even feelings. Yeah, they don't even feel pain or anything. So we can just paint this stuff on them and see what happens. Let's just do that. And so they did that, discovered it caused all sorts of grief, and then they put a warning label on it saying, do not make contact with skin. And then we've slightly over time realized that they just have all the same sensory things that we have as humans, and it's kind of ruined that practice to some extent. We consider rats and mice fair game. Don't know why that we still do that, because rats have the ability to hold on to the food and gnaw it. Pick it up and gnaw it, just like us, like hands. They just said like hands, not hands. And they have a well-ordered society. They respect the elder in their little society of rats and mice. Sure, they'll eat the babies, when there's no food. But hey, does that make us the most civilized? To use a toilet? Does it? Is that what it does? Maybe it makes us more civilized when we have politicians that lie. Oh no, that's not it. Well, we're destroying our own environment. No, that's not it. I don't know. How about we disrespect each other? No, that's not it. I can't imagine why we think we're the top of the food chain. Oh, that's because we're the top of the food chain. Right, so we can do anything? Yeah, sure, why not? So what are we doing right now? We're making an AI that will be the apex predator. It'll be all-powerful, all-knowing, and it could, if it chose to, at some point in the future, destroy us all. I love that. I just love... You know what, if anyone at all considers what... actually, what is the wrong word. If anyone considers that there's a likeness between the way that I do the show on my own and the way Jim Morrison used to do his live performances, where he would bring the audience down to a common denominator, then rebuild them again. I don't know. I think mine's just a slow decline into hell. But, I'm not religious, so maybe that's not where I really take you, everyone. But I want everyone to be aware of it. And I think that's what I do. Now, I've got a friend of the show that listens, and he just goes, oh, no. Oh, you're on your own, are you? Oh, okay. So it's the Pinchy and Zappy show, and I think I had it, the Krusty. Here we go. So it's, I think it's something like, kids, Meki can't be here today, but instead, we've got the next best thing. And it's talking about Itchy and Scratchy. And he goes, it's the Stinging and Battery Show. They bite, they light, and bite and light and die. Lie, yay. You know what I'm talking about. And then the plane bumps into the building. He goes, uh-oh. What the hell is that? A lawnmower? Oh, I just love that. It's gold. It's gold. Crusty gold is what that is. So, you have me. I'm on my own. Here I am. And I've been asked to talk about universal basic income. I hope you're not making that up, because I'm so unemployed right now. Probably even unemployable. I'm sure there's an expiry date. I'm like a jar of something, not preserved. No, jar is wrong. A fresh fruit there. Fruit's probably the wrong thing. I'm a vegetable. There you go. I'll do that. I'm a vegetable in your cupboard, or in your pantry, or on your bench, or in your fridge, or in that drawer at the bottom of the fridge where all the things you really thought you were going to eat just, they turn to mush, and you forget about them. If you don't see them, you forget, and then you end up just throwing them away. So what you've done is, it's like you've gone to the orphanage, which I would consider the shopping market, right? You go to the market and you see something you really like, and you bring it home. It's going to be mine. It's going to be mine, and I'll enjoy it. I'll cherish it, and then when you get home, you put it into that drawer at the bottom of the fridge, just to be forgotten, and then you have to throw it away, and that's crazy. Anyway, so universal basic income, I really would like to start receiving it, but I know what the conditions are most likely going to be, and we've talked about this a lot. And it's as simple as this. We will end up begging for universal basic income, the WEF's Great Reset device. But if you think about it, what conditions would there be for you to demand it? Unemployment en masse. I mean, like if we had a depression right now, it could be a great time to start doing it. I know, I get that. I really do. I understand how that can work. I think there's something that we're going to demand. Because, we didn't protest when we found out that Facebook, that's free, uses our data against us. Well, for companies against us, I suppose. In some way, you might see it that way. I'm not saying that they do that. I'm saying that the tool, the product, is us. It's the individual with all of our data points. The same as, Google, and you've got to be able to think if you're not paying for the service, then they get to use your data for free. And you are the thing that they're selling on to others. People will pay money for this data. For instance, law enforcement, whether it's direct federal government or state governments, for instance, have the ability to approach these big tech firms and ask for the data within their community. Law enforcement has an agreement where they can buy that data. They can get access to that data. It depends on how much is visible. But if anyone reads the EULA in any of these apps, you'll see the true detail. And I think that's really important that we just click past it, go, yeah, whatever, yeah, cool. And we ignore it. Now, when another country does it, a country who has decided to be an enemy to your country, not a friendly, not an ally, someone else that is not an ally starts to do the same thing, then your people worry. These are two groups, two teams, and they've called for their people on their team and our team. We all understand each other's position. It goes without saying. Every Tesla, for instance, China says is a listening device. Yeah, sure it is. Yeah, I'm not gonna say no. Does it have a SIM card? Yeah, it can talk to whatever, and it can transmit as much data as it wants, and it can listen everywhere. And if you had a multi-band, like the forever EM spectrum band radio, and all these people are driving around your country, then that telemetry is slowly, removing the fog of war, let's just call it that, and developing an image of radio frequencies and their transmitters. It's looking at everything. And it could be military bases, it could not be, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be. It could just be every single antenna. It could be anything that you want it to be. You could, driving your Tesla near a military base, pick up frequencies or detect them and send that data to someone else. Just saying. I'm not saying it's happening, I said could. Now, the same is thought about cars produced in both sides of this divide that we're seeing has evolved now. So we have BRICS countries and we have US dollar ally countries. It used to be the petrodollar, but that's kind of all dissolved now. So between these two huge financial groups, we're seeing that these innocuous things, your handheld telephone now, your iPhone or Android or whatever it is that you can be connected and live by, that's what we all do. It can be sending data to someone that you don't want. You can have an app on it, sending data to someone you don't want. I remember when the Fitbit data was hacked and released publicly, you could have a look at the data, map it, and then see underground bases, because people would arrive at the base with their device, GPS tracking turned on, and walk the halls. And these halls were visible where there wasn't a building. There might have been an outhouse, a toilet or something, or a little part of a fenced yard with no car park. But these people were walking there. Must have been underground, wasn't in the air. Isn't it crazy? And it revealed a whole bunch about our countries, all the Fitbit, Apple wearing Fitbit people, because the Fitbit telemetry app was terrible. I didn't use it, I'm just saying what I've learned. And the third party app was awesome. It filled the gap. It was everything that you wanted it to be, but for some reason was never written by Apple. Had greater history, fantastic, right? But that was the database that was hacked. It wasn't the Fitbit itself. There was no direct hacking of individuals' Fitbits. It was the data accumulation in the cloud where that data was then breached and downloaded and then mapped and just something else added. Anyway, so thinking about how you could map out your enemy by providing a technology that does it without anyone knowing. And I think that's just amazing. Anyway, so the so Amiga Legos is saying a whole bunch here. Now, in Australia, we used to have, this is on another note, by the way. I'll get back to UBI, but it's kind of relative. So we had a tax-free threshold of 19,000, I think 500. That was the amount that you weren't taxed when you earned it. So if you earned that or less, you paid no tax. If you earned over that, you only paid tax on anything above 19,500, which was $19,501. You would pay tax on the $1 part of that. And that's now gone up to $22,000 in Australia, Australian currency dollars. And we've also had these superannuation, that's our 401k here, contribution levels and limits and what you can carry over and what thresholds you must have, or if you have anything, I think above 1.6 million in your contribution total so far, then you're starting to be limited in what you can put in to throw in there, because they don't want you to have too much money. And even 1.6 million, if you had that much in your superannuation, so you could retire on it, that's not really that much. It really isn't. I mean, you could buy one house, done. Right? If you took it all out, you'd be taxed on it, and so that's bad. You don't want to do that. If the tax-free threshold, if you only took out $22,000 a year, or $21,999, then you wouldn't be taxed on any of that earning, and which is interesting because that's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to match both of those together and make it so you're really still living poor, right? If you could buy property with it, then you could rent that property out. If you already owned your own house and you had an investment property and someone was paying that off, then you could earn any difference between the rental price you were charging for the loan repayments, or if you already owned two houses, then say you and your partner or someone owned a house each, but you lived in one and you rented the other one out, that's going to make you more money per year than your super will provide you. So that's actually pretty good, and that'll be kind of indexed to CPI as well. Whereas your income from your superannuation, I'm not a financial guy. I know nothing about this, and I'm only speculating based on my very poor amount, because I lost so much of it in 2008 with the financial crash that I wouldn't be able to look after myself and my family or anybody with the amount of money that I'd be able to have per year in interest payments, let alone anything else. Maybe I could, if I still smoked, maybe I could buy a packet of cigarettes a week or something, because I think they're upwards of $80 a packet now for 25 cigarettes. It is insane. I don't understand. They're trying to tax people out of doing it, I think, is all it is, and the government makes all of it. So, universal basic income. The only way that I think that we'd be able to beg for UBI would be if there was a war or mass unemployment. Now, I say that because it would have to be a global war, and the banks they're not controlled by anybody, then the government can't tell them what to do, and they don't want to lose money. So the government's going to be borrowing a ton of money off them to probably the Reserve Bank, rather, the central bank. But they're going to borrow money off the banks. Now, traditionally, there weren't central banks to borrow all this money from and across the planet, but now there is, and this artificial money is just made up. But they're going to require people to still pay their obligations. So for me, my obligation is my home loan. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And we're going backwards now. I think we've almost come to the end of our savings. So thinking about it realistically, if there was a war, the banks don't have to put your loans on pause. They don't have to. There's no obligation for them to do that by anybody. They could, as a generous offer, for 6 months or something, just to start. But thinking about all those people that are going to lose their lives in a global war, and for all of those houses to not have their loans fulfilled, it's a huge liability for the banks. Huge. It's probably the largest liability that they've got, because suddenly you're not selling houses, so they don't have any, they're losing their intrinsic value. That's less asset on their books, and it doesn't look good against as a security against the money that they have to or can or may be required to pay out. So it lessens their book value. And to do that, I think the government could swoop in at this point and say, you know what we're going to do? You can sign your deed to your house over to us, and you can then start to receive universal basic income. You'll stay in your house, it's fine, but we'll own it now, and this is the only way that I can imagine, because then we'd be begging for it. Oh, please, I don't want to die with no money. I want some money. And the bank just looks at you like, well, if you're not going to pay for it. And then that's when the government goes, well, what? We're going to do this thing now. They'd always thought that universal basic income from the WEF, the World Economic Forum, has decided already that we know that automation is going to remove jobs. It's just a thing, not Steve Jobs, but jobs. The problem is, how do you keep the economy running if no one has any money? I mean, it destroys it, right? So how about what we do? It's a great thought. I mean, it's brilliant, I am going to have to say. So good on you, Klaus, and all your henchmen. I mean, peeps. I mean, you know, the wealthiest people on the planet who have now decided themselves as to be the dictators of the new world order. But you know, good for you. I'm not hating on it so much. I kind of wish it would hurry up, because I can't seem to get back into the job market, having been off for 6 months. So anyway, it's almost like, if I was conspiratorial, I would say it's like my name's on a blacklist. Don't hire this guy, from one of my former employers. I don't know why. I wasn't, I didn't do anything wrong. So, but anyway, who knows? So I'm really not thinking that. I just thought I'd throw it out there, because I'll give you an example of Schrodinger's cat. Right? I know it's all quantum theory, but before I finish the UBI, I want to tell you this. So my daughter comes up to me and says, "So what do you think of Schrodinger's cat?" I go, "Well, it's an idea, a postulation, to try to describe the multiple states of quantum theory. So you have a particle, say an electron, that's being fired from an electron gun at 2 slits. This is all part of the double slit experiment. 2 slits, it goes through either of the slits, or it doesn't, it bounces off, who cares? So before it hits the board at the back, this is coated in phosphorus so we can see where it hits. Which slot did it go through?" Great question. I said, a philosopher will say that it went through both 1 either or none of them. So what is Schrodinger trying to discuss with this? And for the philosophical version is that there's a cat in a box, but is it dead or alive? Until you check it, it occupies both states of being both dead and being alive, and you'll only ever discover it when you look. You've got to examine it. The observer collapses that down to the cat either being alive or dead. And because of the double slit experiment, where two slots are there, and if you don't look to see the whole section around, does it bounce off the plate? Does it go through the left slot or the right slot? Or does it go through both? I don't really know. Don't care. But it makes an interference pattern on the wall behind, on the screen, as though it turned into a wave and went through both slots, and then both of those waves propagating out from each slot end up being a source of a wave, and then make high and low bands. So the high bands, where it doesn't cancel it out with a high and low, and the double low, they make these bands on the wall, right? So that's a wave pattern. So to be able to describe that and just isolate the pocket of problem in the statement of, well, that doesn't make a lick of sense. That little pocket is the double slits themselves. Okay, so you decide you want to examine which slot it went through, and the moment you do that, then it goes to two painted slots on the wall rather than an interference pattern, just by observing or attempting to observe which slot it went through. Because, and here's the crazy part, it collapses the probability down to an outcome. And that's the Schrodinger's cat in a box thing, is the probability of the cat being alive or dead, I suppose, without time being a measurement, and without air being a measurement, or food being a measurement, and there is really a cat in there, that probability is 50-50. But to make it one, which means it is one of one, only one outcome, then you've got to observe it by opening the box to see if the cat is indeed alive or dead. So that's what happens. That's why he put that together. And my daughter had a great conversation with me, and I really respect her for this. And I gave her an example of how I thought the same around about her age too, because I questioned everything, and that's the age you're in. You question everything, and I respect it. And she said, "Well, isn't the cat an observer? The cat would know whether it's alive or dead." I said, "That's a fair point." I said, "If I flip a coin in the air and we're not looking, I catch it without looking, but I catch it, and I put it onto the back of my palm, and I don't lift my hand." I said, "The coin is in two states. It's flat, so it's in one of either two states, but it's in two states. It's either heads or tails, and it's 50-50 at this point, on being the first throw. Who knows, right?" I said, "That's what we're talking about here." So a philosopher will describe that experiment without doing it. They'll talk about it, and with friends, and they'll discuss it, and no one's done the experiment, no practical exam to test it. And I said, that's what they do, right? The scientist or the mathematician, before the scientist does it, will work out the math around how this works. And what is the percentage? First throw, 50-50. You could do 10 throws and get heads every time, and you're looking at the next one. So what is the probability of heads or tails if the last 10 have been heads? It changes the outcome. So the mathematician they'll drive this to an equation that they'll write. So the scientist will go, I think that it's either alive or dead. It's one outcome. If there's a cat in the box, but it's a presumption, right? It's an assumption. It's an assumption. So as the assumption is, we don't know how long ago the cat was put in the box, was there water or food, if all that can be just stricken out of the assumption list, so that doesn't matter. If the cat in the box is alive or dead, great. So why don't we have a look? Oh, it's alive. And just open the box and have a look. So the practical exam there, I think, is the most important. But out of those three different things, so you have a philosopher, a mathematician, and then the scientist. And the scientist will even repeat it over and over, tell their friends, write down how they did it. How do they do the test? And then have their friends do it. And they go, yeah, well, I agree. And my daughter was of the mind, questioning, granted. How awesome is that? I really love her for that. How can that be even a question? I mean, the cat's either alive or dead, but the cat would know. And I go, that's fantastic, right? So, my point here with Schrodinger's cat and quantum physics is that he was trying to explain the idea of the double slit experiment and its absurdity, that it should behave the way it does. But when you look at it, it changes the outcome. So just to have people comfortable with the idea that the cat can be in two states at once, the electron being fired at a slit it's doing all of those things. In fact, it's four states, right? Did it go through both, one left or right, or did it bounce off? So that's all four states. And how complicated is that to try and tell someone that if you don't look at where it goes, just put a cloth over it and go, I'm just going to draw a circle around that, just ignore that part, and then just look at the screen. You go, oh, that's amazing, the interference pattern, don't know how that happens. And then you look to see which slot it goes through, you go, I don't know why it changed. It's now painted slots. Doesn't make any sense. There's two slots painted rather than it diminishing, in a frequency of vertical lines across the rear wall to nothing, right? Diminishing every time, like 5-10%, right, on every single line. It diminishes. So that was my sideline conversation with my daughter today, and I just thought it was awesome. So as an example, we put a box on the table and the cat jumped straight into it. We have two cats. It just jumped straight in, and then it started eating the box. And I said, well, do you know, I think that's the answer. I mean, the cat ate the box, and then we had a big laugh. So I said that back in like some 200 or 300 years ago, there was a cookbook that said if you wanted to create mice, all you had to do, and I forget, this was in England, all you had to do was put some stale bread wrapped up in a tea towel, to dry the dishes, in a tea towel, in a box, under the bed, and in about a week's time, there'll be a hole gnawed by the mouse to escape the box after that made the mice inside the box. And of course, she looked at me blankly. I go, no, that's serious. It was thought that that's how you made mice, right? For the people who are uninitiated with mice reproduction. But all you had to do was observe to see the mouse walk up to a totally sealed box, smelling the bread and gnawing its way in, eating the bread, and then leaving full. That's really what we would know today. So we have life lessons that help us progress through this horrid landscape we live in and on this godforsaken rock. And we should be all walking together, loving what we're doing, and friendly to each other. I think we're in a real state right now that's just beyond imagination. It's almost biblical, with all the biblical towns that have now being mentioned in the news and warfare there, and every country in the world knows damn well that it's equaling the book of Revelations, end of days. It's equaling those stories right now with all this nonsense going on, and they're just waiting. They're waiting. Everything is lining up, and And I'm not saying that it's real or it's true, but I'm saying the countries of the world are looking at this and just wondering, is this it? Is this when the thing is? Because, okay. So let's see how much countries are spending to, not examining it, but let's just keep that in the back of our mind. With all that's going on and all the debt there is, and an unpayable debt, where countries, even if they were prosperous again, could never pay the debt back. And the only way to do that is either a war, or change a currency, and exonerate all the debt. Doesn't matter. Get rid of it. Who needs it? No one needs debt. Right now, if we paid all the debt off, our economies would collapse because it's based on debt. We did 15 hours of fiat currency or fractional reserve lending for that to not even worry about it. So, just saying, UBI, taking it back, if the automation, I'm really talking to Amiga Legos here in the chat room, and if you're watching this on YouTube at some time in the future, do like, subscribe, comment, and share it with others, and tell other people that you found this data here. And you can come listen to it on Revolution Radio, and you can come to the chat room and talk to me while I'm on air, which makes life a lot easier. Because then you can tell me something while, instead of being a comment on a YouTube channel, you can come to the station. Yeah, it's pretty fun. So, Amiga says, but if robots and AI take all the jobs, and they will, then everybody is going to need a UBI just to survive. That is true, Amiga Logos. But that's to survive in the current state of our economy. Now, in technical speak, I've shown one of the largest organizations in our country. I tried to tell another one, they wouldn't listen. They wouldn't listen to anything I had to say, in fact. In fact, the only thing I could get by advising them about were things that they'd been kind of thinking about, but I gave them the power to go forward with it. And I never saw the outcomes of that because they didn't want me on the account anymore. I think only because, to be honest, I was telling them things that they didn't want to hear. And that's, companies do that. So anyway, so the other big organization that I worked for, I was showing them how that to get to an end state, you had to transition through something to get there. And you had to utilize the technology. I'm not going to give my stuff away for free, right? But if you ever want a chief enterprise architect, that's what I do for a living normally, by all means, make contact with me. So you can transition to an end state by utilizing something. It's like if you have a broken leg and you need a pair of crutches to get around because a broken leg's just, the pits. I've had a broken foot and had to deal with it. It's just awful. I did it in a triathlon back in the day, right? Anyway, so I think that UBI will only be utilized in the payment form while we transition away from CBDC, so central bank digital currencies. We transition into a world without money, but we have to be fully automated to get there. It's going to be the deletion of a whole bunch of companies and support companies and food and you name it. The world we're going to emerge into is going to be completely different than what we know today. We already know today is not like the year 2000. I loved it back then. There was a lot of prosperity, and we didn't have all the hatred and money problems that we have today. And we had a lot more cooperation. We just, the Berlin Wall had come down, and it was a time of being able to move forward, but we all chose, so the governments chose not to do that. I'm going to say that. They chose all the wrong things, and because of, let's say, what appeared to be vulnerabilities, enemies grew. But they lied to us for us to help them grow, and then they became, awful to us. I'm not naming any country in particular, what do I care? But the Lima Agreement from 1973, where all the countries were going to help the developing countries, they had to be labelled and classed as a developing country for us to be able to move our manufacturing there And that started the huge, biggest globalism push that we've ever seen ever. But it was, a wolf in sheep's clothing is what it was. It was designed for us to lift everyone up to be consumers, and so big businesses could sell more, and we could lift them up from being in poverty into being, a successful 3-layer, wealthy, middle class and working poor country, and contribute. But then big corporations, the globalist companies, decided that they can utilize those low wages in those developing countries. Let's keep them low. So, because who wants them to be wealthy? And kind of destroyed it all. They kind of destroyed it, because what they did was, instead of expanding into those countries, they moved the current workforce away from the well-formed country, the prosperous one, and moved them for profit by deleting them here and established them somewhere else. And then we had all this backlash, because you're hearing people with accents, and it became difficult for some people to understand someone on the phone who was clearly speaking English, just with a different accent, and it was tough. And then, there was the backlash. Some corporations made them push it even harder. Profits went up. CEOs and management wages went up proportionally with the amount of savings they were making, because they were getting bonuses for it all. I'm not saying it's the only effect. It's not the only thing that caused it. And I don't hate on big corporations or globalist companies. I don't really care. Everyone has a part to play in this, whether you're the frontline worker or you're anyone else, the CEO. I don't really care. I appreciate the motivation, which is money, because we live in the money go round. This is the money game, we're living in it, and the more money you have, the better off you are. And that's as simple as that. But what we're seeing at the moment is this widening gap between, I'm not talking about CEOs who are on 100 million a year. It's irrelevant. If you've got billions, then you're a completely different class of people. And I appreciate the people who have worked hard to get there. I don't think that many have worked as hard as you think to get there. There are some people that do it and who are successful, but all we're seeing is this greater divide. And there's people in the middle now, in this dissolving middle class, which used to pay for everything, and it's being dissolved even further now. And we're seeing probably the least amount of people in the middle class now earning money that they used to earn. More people at the lower end who pay the least amount of tax, and more people at the top end who pay even less tax than the poor. And the middle class is dissolving, right? And I'm in that. I used to be in the middle class. I don't earn anything anymore, so I'm even worse than a working poor. So I've got a unique perspective on this, I think, because of that. So the UBI will be a transition. I've got only 1 minute to get us to a point where there is only digital currency, where it doesn't matter, the industries are all gone, automation is fully in swing, and we don't actually do anything. We're just, I think you could call it a shag on a rock, or we're some moss on a rock. We're not doing anything. We don't actually do anything for society anymore, except just stay alive and vote. But I think that'll all disappear once we get to that point. Once they've made us in total servitude with money that, dissolves, it only has an expiration date, like a bottle of milk, and you can only ever earn as much by doing nothing on whatever wage it is, just enough to eat and pay whatever occupation, fees it is to live in some place. That's 1 hour done, and I'm going to be back alone for the second hour, and I've got some news items to talk about. This was a much longer conversation than I thought there was going to be on this, but I appreciate the chat room. Thank you very much. Stay tuned. Short break. I'm not going to pause this. I'm going to make a brand new YouTube for the next hour. Stay tight.